Thank you, Walam. That was so beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for showing up today at our Candlelight Vigil, at GMAACC's Candlelight Vigil. It is so important to come together and stand in solidarity with our Asian American community. Our first speaker with our opening statement is Andrea So, the president and co-founder of GMAACC. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you今晚嚟到我哋 GMAACC 同埋 MaldenCORE 合辦嘅燭光追悼會。喺度我哋紀念亞特蘭大州槍殺嘅6位美籍亞裔女士。身為美籍亞裔人士，我哋對今次針對亞裔人嘅災難感到非常悲痛同埋憤怒。希望在此對無辜受害者嘅家人同朋友送上我哋最深切嘅慰問。亦都好抱歉，因為準備時間不足，我哋今日唔可以為大家提供翻譯服務。以下嘅節目將會用英文進行。Friends and neighbors, thank you for joining us this evening. These past 2 weeks have been a time of grief, anger, and fear over the murders of the 8 people in Atlanta, where a white supremacist went on a shooting rampage targeting Asian American women. Today, we gather as a community to mourn the loss of their lives and try to begin our healing. We learned that some families of the victims have asked for their names not to be shared. We respect their decisions and will not be reading their names today. To pretend this wasn't a racist incident is to ignore the legacy of anti-Asian sentiment that continues to pervade our lives today. Today, many Asian Americans continue to be attacked because of racist political rhetoric. Today, those with lower English proficiency are shut out from economic opportunities. Today, Asian Americans endure the daily indignities we have grown accustomed to. Nationally, Stop AAPI Hate reports that there were 3,800 anti-Asian racist incidents this past year. 68% of these were against Asian American women. Asian American women are the core of our communities as essential workers, business owners, healthcare workers, unpaid caregivers, mothers, our sisters, our daughters. This violence lies at the intersection of race, gender, class, and immigration. This racialized misogynistic violence has its long-standing roots in America's colonialist and imperialist history. It's tempting to think that anti-Asian racism only exists in other places, but we'd be wrong to assume that. In Boston alone, the number of reported anti-Asian hate incidents more than doubled from 2019 to 2020. In Malden, 21% of our Asian Americans live below poverty, a higher rate than the overall 16% of Maldonians. Around the regions, our partners have received countless requests for help because of how challenging it is for our low English proficient community members to access a system for unemployment benefits, to get an appointment for COVID vaccine, and to even vote. Last year, GMAACC and MaldenCORE partnered and held a town hall addressing physical acts of violence both nationally, but also right here in Malden, with spitting, egg throwing, vandalism, and much more. In Malden, where almost a quarter of community identify as Asian American, we must do better. We are tired and devastated. Chinese American civil rights activist Grace Lee Boggs once said, "Every crisis, actual and pending, needs to be viewed as an opportunity to bring about profound changes in our society." Going beyond protest organizing, visionary organizing begins by creating images and stories of the future that helps us imagine, create alternatives to the existing system. What do we want to envision? What community do we want to create here? And I'll leave you to ponder. And next, we'll welcome Pastor Dan of 7 Mile Road Church in Malden.
My name is Dan Coe, and I'm an Asian American man. You know, for the longest time, I was afraid to admit that and publicly declare that, because most of my life I've done actually everything I can to fit in with the majority, to not stick out too much from the crowd, to do what I'm told, like a good model minority would. You know, it's the Asian stereotypes that caused me to believe that I was other, that I was different, that my voice wasn't valued at the table. No, I don't know karate. No, Jeremy Lin is not my brother. And yes, I'm sure. And yes, I'm really from Chicago. I've had people call me racial slurs on the streets from their cars. I've been ignored in meetings at the same table with many other folks. I've seen the disgusted looks of folks looking at me as I relate to my parents in their native tongue of Korean. And I know I'm not the only Asian here that has experienced those things or felt those things. See, the sad reality is that racism is still alive then and today. Our country has a history of silencing the Asian voice, of dehumanizing, actually sexualizing the Asian woman. And we've been told far too many times that we should go back to our own country, where we came from. That's why, it's as sad as it sounds, I'm not surprised by what happened in Atlanta. I'm not surprised by the recent uprising in violence against our Asian elders. I'm not surprised by the murder of the Asian women of our families. It breaks my heart, but I'm not surprised. So what do we do now? I guess I could fight back with returning hate for hate, right? I could do that. I could start calling people names because they've called me names. I could maybe even return violence for violence because violence was shed on my people. But if history tells us anything, hate is never the answer to progress. Only hope is. As a Christian, instead of hate, I choose to hope. I choose to hope because I know that God has created this world perfectly, that He created my black brothers, my brown brothers, my indigenous brothers and sisters, my Asian brothers and sisters, my white brothers and sisters, all equally. It's too much to explain in a minute, but being made in God's image means that we are beautifully diverse and wonderfully unified. To be made in God's image means that my El Salvadoran neighbor, he's not just my neighbor, that he can actually become my family, that his family is my family. That's the Christian ethic. I choose to hope because for me, I know where all of this is headed. It's not all going to stay this way. In fact, God paints a beautiful picture in the scriptures in Revelation where He says, "After this, I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages." In other words, the future, our future, is a beautiful, multi-ethnic reality, rich in diversity, stronger because we're unified. That's why I choose to hope. But today we're here to mourn and remember. A day to mourn our sisters and mothers and grandmothers and daughters and aunts who are victims of not just senseless violence, but active hate. So if you would, in a show of solidarity, we're going to begin our time together with a moment of silence. If you're here with somebody that's from your same household that you are comfortable holding hands with, please do that. Otherwise, you can have your hands at your sides. And let's have a moment of silence to remember those lives that we lost in Atlanta. Now remember, this isn't the same passive Asian silence that we've been trained to exude. This is us standing strong together in solidarity. It's us picturing to the watching world that we aim to make progress towards that better and brighter future. One where hate has no home. One where we love our neighbors as ourselves. And one where every tribe, every tongue, every nation, every people belongs. So let's spend the next 60 seconds in silence, remembering those lives, and then end that in prayer. If you would, you can join me in prayer. Father God, we pray that you would first and foremost comfort those who are mourning today. The families who have lost their moms and aunts and grandmothers and sisters and daughters. God, that those families would be comforted by your comfort, that it would be real and tangible. That they would know that there's a group of folks in Malden, Massachusetts, remembering them and with them, standing with them. Father, I also pray for justice. Justice all across this country and our world for those that are victims of hate, those that face racism, that there will be justice for them, because you are a God of justice. And Father, I pray that starting in this city and in many others across our country, that there would be a rising of people who care for their neighbor as themselves, who love their neighbor because they're made in your image. And so, Father, I pray that you would do that in this city, that we would be a city, a beacon of light that shines forth that better and brighter future, that you would begin here with our people. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Rev Co. The next person we'd love to invite is Thomas Tran to make our land acknowledgement statement.
Before we continue with our programming, we'd like to make our land and labor acknowledgement. Though we are all connecting today from different homes and different communities, we are all situated on the traditional territory of Native people who have had meaningful ties with this land for generations before us. We acknowledge that our nation and the benefits we have are founded on stolen ground and the exploitation of indigenous people, enslaved peoples, people of color, and now undocumented peoples. We also acknowledge that this is nowhere near enough to undo the centuries of harm and trauma that has wrought against these marginalized people and their land. Most of us are likely connecting from Massachusetts land. If you'd like to find out which native land you are situated on, please visit natives-land.ca. Thank you, everybody. And now I'd like to invite Peter Huang to speak.
Yeah, my name is Peter Huang, Massive Action Council member. So it's very sad this afternoon. These victims are our sisters. Their family have a hard time after they lost their family members. We have to pray for their families. There are more and more anti-Asian rivals in America recently. We have to say no Asian hate to stop this kind of tragedy. Let everybody know Asian Americans are not the silence of the lambs. We have a hard time right now. We encourage more people to serve the Asian American community, to help more people. Thank you. Let me introduce Tamito Bayer.
Hi everyone, my name is Tamiko Bayer, and I'm going to be reading 2 poems today. And the first, I'm very honored to be here and to mourn and grieve together, and I think collective grieving is so important towards creating change and making action. And so this poem is about the embodiment of collective grief. It's called The Flood. In the theater of the former Capitol, dancers and musicians swept bullets and rotten wood off the stage. On the night of the performance, their costumes fluttered, rags in the updrift. Rigged lights flickered like intermittent bird calls, then steadied. The audience breathed as a single taut animal. At the curtain's rise, the hard knot in every one of our throats burst, caught fire, became a wail. The dancers raised their arms in unison. A slow procession of tears flowed from our eyes to our chins to our laps. The drummers drummed. Our tears pooled on the floor, lapped at our ankles. Wind and stringed instruments winged through bullet holes and hunger. When we all finally swallowed the last note, the theater was a salty lake. Folding chairs became boats on which we floated out into the night, our bodies strangely light, mirrors to the stars in the cloudless sky, wings unfurling on our backs. And this next poem is about community and how we need community to resist and to survive and to thrive. It's called Equinox. Dear child of the near future, here is what I know. Hawks soar on the updraft and sparrows always return to the seed source until they spot the circling hawk. Then they disappear for days and return, a full flock, ready. I think we all have the power to do what we must to survive. One day I hope to set a table, invite you to draw up a chair. Greens, steaming garlic, slices of bread still warm, honey flecked with wax, and a pitcher of clear water. Sustenance for acts of survival, for incantations stirring across our tongues. Can we climb out of this greedy mouth and disappear, then return in force? My stars are tucked in my pocket, ready for battle. If we flood the streets with salt water, we can flood the sky with wings. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamiko. That was beautiful. Brought back memories for me of Amanda Gorman performing at the President Biden's inauguration. I'm State Senator Jason Lewis. It's such a privilege to be sharing this microphone with such inspiring speakers and talented artists this evening. And I am speaking on behalf of the entire Malden State Legislative Delegation, myself, Representative Steve Altrino, Representative Paul Donato, and Representative Kate Lippick-Arabedian. And I do want to recognize Rep. Altrino regrets he can't be with us, but Representative Paul Donato is here, and Representative Kate Lippick-Arabedian is here as well. Thank you for being with us. We stand together with all of you to express our deep sadness over the senseless and hateful attack that claimed the lives of 8 victims in Georgia last week. And we stand together with all of you to express our strong support for and our solidarity with our Asian American neighbors here in the city of Malden and across the country. In the last year, there has been a sharp increase in hate crimes targeting the AAPI community, with nearly 70% of these despicable acts committed against Asian American women. This proliferation of hate is fueled by a toxic brew of white supremacy, racism, xenophobia, misogyny, and gun violence. One of the steps that we can take here in Massachusetts is to strengthen our existing hate crime statutes. And I'm pleased to be a co-sponsor, along with my colleagues, of legislation that has been proposed by Attorney General Maura Healey that will provide clearer definitions of what constitutes a hate crime, and it will enable our law enforcement and our prosecutors to better protect victims and hold perpetrators accountable for these despicable acts. But beyond legislation, we all, each one of us, has a role to play in preventing hate crimes and acts of bias and discrimination against Asian Americans and other people of color. We must all strive to be upstanders, not bystanders whose silence makes us complicit. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said in his letter from the Birmingham jail, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I'd like to close by reaffirming that the Malden community is safe and welcoming to all, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, or any other personal characteristic. We respect and we value every person for their fundamental self-worth and dignity as a fellow human being. We embrace diversity. We welcome diversity. We reject hate. We reject intolerance, and we reject discrimination of any kind. Thank you very much to GMAACC, MaldenCORE, and to Maddie Lam, and to all of the sponsors, not just for organizing the vigil tonight, but for the very important work that you do every single day in the community to make Malden a more just and equitable place for all of our residents. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce City of Malden's Mayor, Gary Christensen.
Thank you to GMAACC for organizing this vigil and bringing our community together. I stand here tonight with my colleagues from both the school committee and city council. We stand together in solidarity with our Asian American community, not only to mourn those who were murdered in Atlanta, but to also condemn the racist violence, the rise in attacks, and the targeted racial, ethnic, and gender-based hate crimes against Asian Americans that we have seen in our communities and across the country. We also stand together to acknowledge that all too often we are moved to make statements like this only after events like the murders in Atlanta. But let me say that our support unequivocally does not stop here. As a community, it is our duty to take care of one another and continue to work toward creating a city where everyone feels safe and valued. Our City Council and School Committee both took strong stands condemning anti-Asian violence and hate crimes last year. And my office has been and will continue to meet with GMAACC monthly to keep the conversation of how we can collectively move Malden forward at the forefront. Hate has no home here, and we are proud to be standing with you tonight as allies, and we thank you once again for bringing our community together. I would now like to end with a poem by Chan. America has power, but not justice. In prison, we were victimized as if we were guilty. Given no opportunity to explain, it was really brutal. I bow my head in reflection, but there is nothing I can do.
It is now my honor, which I wasn't told beforehand, but I'm so happy and proud and glad to say that Madeline Lam, who is an amazing Malden High School graduate, who has been a pleasure to work with, who came to us and she wanted to do something, and we helped and mentored her, and she wrote a song specifically for this event with her beautiful angelic voice. So here comes Maddie Lam.
Hi everyone. This song is called Moon Women, and it's for Asian women who reflect the moonlight. Shines in a voice that can't seem to bloom, and they don't have a care in the world for you, 'cause you're different, better off silent. You're not the one to fit their glass-heeled shoe. What if following your dreams was the only way to heal your heart? Thank you. The next speaker is Vivian Ho.
大家好，我今天想先开始说，对不起，我中文的能力不太好，所以今天要说的话是要用英文说，但是用中文说，我至少能说我心里很重，真的很伤心。Hi y'all, my name's Vivian. I have been organizing with NAPOF for a couple of years, and just have a couple of things to say. So, what we've seen, and other people have mentioned this as well, it's what we've been seeing now, and it continue to see. The rise in anti-Asian violence has disproportionately impacted women who know firsthand that racism and misogyny are deeply intertwined. An Asian woman cannot separate her Asianness or her womanness. It doesn't come apart. So NAPOF is a national organization with local chapters fighting for reproductive justice for trans folks, gender nonconforming folks, and women across the nation. The second thing is Asian American and Pacific Islander women have been targeted with racialized misogyny long before the pandemic and even outside the borders of the United States. Our history doesn't start the second we walk on these grounds. And the third thing is that our liberation is tied to the liberation of other marginalized communities. We stand in solidarity with Black and Latinx and all communities of colors, and we do not want an escalated law enforcement response to protect us. That's not what feels safe. Well, now listen to the next part. We want our friends, our neighbors, and our communities to stand with us against racism, misogyny, and hate. We need all of you, everyone in the U.S., to step up for our protection. It's not enough for you to distance yourself from racist, sexist behaviors. You have to call them out. So we're here to center the needs of communities on the ground. We want a response that centers the needs of our communities, that stands with the people experiencing the most harm, with the women, with the elders, that tackles systemic racism and white supremacy that continues to plague our nation. And we want a response that addresses the needs of survivors with services such as increased culturally informed victim support, community support, meaningful physical and mental health care access, including for all immigrants, and economic assistance that focuses on those who need it most. Again, we do not need more law enforcement. Time and time again, more law enforcement has not led to protection and safety. The current criminal justice system, with its racial profiling, police brutality, and killings, leaves Black lives especially at risk. When I think about safety, I think about the fact that even after today, we have this rally here, right? And we're all saying that we stand for safety. We want to protect our people. But I know that I'm a teacher and my students don't even feel safe coming back to school. If they have the option to do remote learning, they're going to keep on doing it. And so this one day where we take a stand is not enough. We need to think about what's actually going to make us feel safe, what's actually going to make us feel protected and make people feel like they shouldn't be doing those things. Maybe you shouldn't be attacking elderly on the street. How about that? NAPOF as a national organization has asked President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris to invest in our communities. And they asked them to dedicate $300 million in federal funding to stem the rise in anti-Asian violence after the attacks this week in Atlanta, with much of the money dedicated towards long-term community safety and victim assistance services. including funding for linguistically and culturally, as I've said before. Other funding would go toward creating alternatives to law enforcement, such as violence prevention and crisis intervention programs. I know we've had some people come up here saying that they stand for safety. Let's ask them to put their money where their mouth is. Asian people in our community need to feel like they belong. And when you put them to the side, we can all see that. We can all see when Asian people are not prioritized or any other communities of color are not being prioritized, and that emboldens people to attack our communities. Again, let's not do that. Okay, I'm done.
I would love to invite Michelle Chan for our next singing event. Sorry, I don't next singing thing. Sorry.
Hello, everybody. I am dedicating this song to my mother and father and all the other Asian American health workers who are working to fight against this pandemic for us. And let this be a reminder that as long as we are here for each other, everything will be okay. I'll be there for you.
When you wake up each morning and you feel like calling, I'll be there for you. And the road is uncertain and you can't stop the hurting, I'll be there for you. When there's no one beside you, I'll be there to guide you, catch you each time you fall. When the stars won't shine anymore, I'll be there. When the world is unkind and your dreams, they need more time,
Thank you. I would like to now invite the Greater Malden Youth, starting with Billy.
Good evening. My name is Billy, and I currently sit on the Greater Malden Asian American Community Coalition GMAACC board as a youth member. Ever since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, I have lived in fear every day. Scrolling through social media outlets and seeing videos of Asian elders being attacked remind me of my own family and culture. To my non-Asian peers, those videos are used to spread awareness and raise conversation around the issue of anti-Asian violence. To me, those videos are a bridge into my Asian American identity. The grandmas that I see on my Instagram stories remind me of my own, and how she would go on the same supermarket trips, going to the store to get the ingredients needed to make my favorite Chinese dishes, and I think back and remember how much happiness a bowl of fresh rice noodles brought my preteen self. The hateful events that took place last Tuesday and the countless acts of violence around this country have taught me that our Asian American community is resilient, and we will stand together to fight against white supremacy and the injustices that have long plagued our ancestors and current day community members. If you have the power to create change, I stand here tonight to urge you to listen to the Asian Americans who are speaking and courageously advocating for our community, to understand their issues and shed light on how to be a better ally, a better global citizen, and a better community member. To my fellow students, we, the youth, have power. I know it may not seem like it, but over the past year, I was grateful enough to have received opportunities to learn what it means to be in a community and what action truly looks like. For the longest time, I wanted to make a difference that would leave behind a positive impact, but I was scared. Scared to put myself out there, scared to advocate for my communities, scared to have all eyes on me. But after all the injustices that we have seen this past year, enough is enough. Change must start with us. Because I promise you that Asian American youth are speaking, I know I am, and I will not be silent. But are you ready to listen? Thank you. I will now pass it off to Malden High School junior Sammy to speak a few words. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm also a Malden High senior.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Sammy. I'm not really known for public speaking. I'm not really known for public speaking. I just avoid eye contact, pretend like it doesn't happen, and run away. Because as an Asian American woman, that is how I survive. But after the killings in Atlanta, I started hearing that sending one email is enough, that checking that off your checklist solves everything in the world. But Atlanta was the nexus of evil. It was racism, classism, misogyny. But it was not an isolated incident. As I was on my way to this event, another name popped up on my phone. Another person was affected as I was walking, as I was avoiding eye contact, as I was pretending like it didn't happen. As I was walking, I was looking over my shoulder, looking in all different directions, because I was scared that I would be another statistic or another name pronounced incorrectly on the news. But I am here today, trying my best not to avoid eye contact, not pretending like it didn't happen, and not running away to tell you that there is no such thing as doing too much. I failed to speak up for a long time because I felt like I was disappearing. I want to enunciate how much it means for me, for everyone to be here tonight listening to me. I know that it feels like we're at an all-time low, but I want to tell you that we're on the precipice. We are starting something that is long overdue, but is still revolutionary. We are fighting against the force of hate with the power of love. I urge you to continue to disrupt the practices that divide and villainize us. To remind you to keep moving forward, acknowledge that the evils we are experiencing are just small retaliations against the beginning of a vigorous movement. I believe that justice is on the precipice. I believe in all of us. Thank you. like to invite Mandy on the stage.
Hi, my name is Mandy Sun, and I am a GMAACC youth organizer alongside Billy and Enzo. When I reflect back on the 8 lives from last Tuesday, I feel a myriad of emotions. Frustrated, sad, disturbed, stressed, and hurt, but not shocked. I had an inkling that things would escalate this way. The awful rhetoric spread about Asians happens every day. It just recently happened to my friends 2 days ago. And it occurs in my parents' workplace as I hear people snicker behind their backs. This violence has been happening since last year, and youth and adults have been organizing against anti-Asian racism about it since last year. Yet the backburns and beatings of our brothers and sisters were somehow not enough to warrant compassion and care. The tragic fact is that it took the killing of 8 individuals for authorities to wake up and listen. And yet it's still a debate on whether the killer was racially motivated because he was clearly just having a bad day. And somehow, this excuse of a bad day also excuses the Band-Aid solution we're given: more police. Where are the mandated curriculum changes, the mental health support, the mandated anti-racist trainings? It's been a week, and somehow I feel as if my surroundings have already forgotten about the 8 lives lost in Atlanta. We're easily invalidated and invisible, and I don't believe it's by our choice, because we have been here preaching the same thing for more than a decade. I feel despair because I, like other youth, see our grandparents, parents, and friends in those 8 lives. I think what hurts the most about this tragedy is the realization of the inevitability of another tragedy. The inevitability that it might happen to us, all because our institutions simply won't change. So like Billy and Sammy had said, I ask that we all go beyond the checklist of an ally and an activist. Solidarity is beyond packaging complex topics into 3 Instagram infographics and posting them. It's beyond buying and eating commodified Asian culture. It's looking beyond our traits and traditions and instead creating actual movement through established discussions in order to create a revolution of institutional changes. It's being aware of ourselves and how we play a part in the system. It's strategic and full of compassion. And it's a lifelong commitment to love. So thank you. And I'm going to pass it off to Enzo, who is an amazing activist as well.
Hello, my name is Enzo Nguyen. Outside of my role as a GMAACC youth organizer, I'm a graphic designer / artist, and I go to Northeastern. So, for me, the fight for liberation has empowered me to feel love. There's no denying this. But when I heard the news of the shootings that happened miles and miles away in Atlanta, I found myself deeply affected with grief. Even though they were so far away, they felt so close to me. Because to me, they resembled the women in my family, my aunts who worked at spas, and my mom's friends at the local Vietnamese church. But I hope that our experience with grieving for people miles and miles away shows that we cannot distance ourselves from this history of the US demonizing our people and our homelands so that it can justify hate crimes and the expansion of military bases that pollute our Southeast and East Asian countries such as Philippines and Japan. And we cannot distance ourselves from the history of the United States using Asian Americans as model minorities to justify racism towards us and towards other people of color. Furthermore, we cannot distance ourselves from the responsibility to learn how to sustain liberation for all marginalized people. But today it has become, apparent to me that we cannot distance ourselves from the grief felt for the lives lost as a result of Robert Aaron Long's commitment to white supremacy. I want to propose a suggestion on how to deal with this grief and show that grief belongs in our fight for liberation as much as love does. Last Friday, I attended a virtual performance from artist Sarah Cargill. From all the way across the country in California, they said something that stuck out to me, that we cannot treat grief as something to go into and just leave behind. I think this is something most of us are forced to do as a habit. This is something that my peers and I experienced in high school, where the pressure of education required us to focus
on what projects and homework assignments are due next week, when instead we could have spent time learning to process grief and racism and also finding community within each other. So at Cargill's performance, what I learned is that for liberation to sustain, grief has to become a continuous process of acceptance and honoring. Today we are fortunate that we can be together in person as we grieve for victims of the Atlanta shooting. And before we are once again in our own homes, only able to see each other through the screen, please consider that grief is something that our community has to give time to through events like this vigil, and that grief is also something that our workplaces, our schools, and the U.S. government has to systemically build time for by ensuring that our friends and family aren't constantly worried about being able to survive or pay off bills and debts. And before we head home today, please embrace the intimacy of being in the same space with people in our community and continue to listen and learn from the experience of marginalized people, like my Asian American peers who have shared their experiences of grief and love. I strongly believe that I will see change happen within our community. And I want to welcome Carrie McDonald. Thank you.
My name's Carrie McDonald. I live here in Malden, and I'm here for a simple reason, which is that everyone has a right to be safe in their own community. Everyone has a right to be safe in our community here in Malden. And we know that white supremacy and patriarchy and a brutal economy and the ways they're intertwined are a huge threat to our democracy, to our very safety, to our very lives. To our lives. You know, I really appreciate what you said, Enzo, about grief, because this past year has been so filled with grief, so many lives lost, and ways that the trauma will unfold over years for us as people living through this time. And through it has been laced this thread of anti-Asian violence and bigotry that has just been insult on top of injury. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart reading yet another news story that brings out another vigil like this, because everyone has a right to be safe in our own community. It's not new because anti-Asian violence is not new because Asian people have been in this country for hundreds of years. And each successive wave of immigration, of people coming to seek a better life, has encountered a new wave of that bigotry. The Chinese Exclusion Act, Japanese internment in World War II. This is just the latest wave. As a Black multiracial person myself, I believe that it is possible to create a community where everyone is safe. And when I was texting with some of the GMAACC leaders earlier this week, and I just said, whatever you need, whatever I can do to help. And I said that knowing that GMAACC leaders have said the same things when it's been my people in the news under attack. That's what safety can really look like. That's what care for each other and our community looks like, and we're gonna need that, y'all. We're gonna need to hold on to that and cultivate that across every level of our community. So I'm here because I believe that everyone has a right to be safe. I'm part of a group called Malden Police Alternatives and Accountability. And like Vivian and others said, we recognize that safety is not just a function of laws and law enforcement, but it is those community connections. It's the things that help us survive and thrive in the throes of crisis when we're under threat. It's the care that we show for each other. That's what I'm here to proclaim as loud as I can. The cultures, traditions, languages, ethnicities of the Asian community in Malden is a tremendous blessing. It is a beautiful part of our city. It's something I love about my community, and it is my high privilege to stand here today in solidarity with that. I just want to quote a friend and colleague of mine, Elizabeth Wynn, who said, "We're here for real safety and survival, side by side." It's not rhetorical. It is real safety and survival. And if we don't care for each other and provide for the mental health, the language access, all of those pieces that folks have already named right here on this stage, that can't happen. But I believe that with that's the same reason that you're here too. And so thank you for that, and thank you for this opportunity, and my heart goes out to you all. And let me introduce the next speaker, who also happens to be my pastor, Reverend Otto O'Connor.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Otto O'Connor, and I'm the minister of the First Parish in Malden Unitarian Universalist Church, and I am honored to have been asked by my friends at GMAACC to speak in solidarity with the Asian American community tonight. And I'm so grateful for the work that they've been doing in our community and to put together this vigil. Tonight, my heart lies heavy with the loss of Asian American lives, at the terror that this community has experienced at the hands of white America. It is clear that this insidious power of white supremacy spares no one. And Asian Americans this week, and for this past year, and for the history of this country and world, has had to deal with these very real consequences of that white supremacy. So I want to take this moment as a person of faith, and as a white person, and as a member and citizen of Malden, to speak in solidarity with the Asian American community, to let you know that you are not alone in the fight against racist forces of anti-Asian violence, and you are not alone in this fight for justice and liberation. And I want to take this moment to remind everyone here, especially those of us who are white, that this is our responsibility and this is our fight, to speak out against racism and violence against Asian and Asian Americans, to dismantle white supremacy in ourselves and in our communities, to listen to what the communities of color are saying to us that they need. And finally, I want to ask the Spirit of life and the God of love and understanding, who knows many names and no name, to please help us change these systems that have allowed such horrible acts to occur. So let us stand together in solidarity in our fight against racism, against patriarchy, against anti-Asian violence and white supremacy, and in our yearning for justice and liberation for all people. May it be so. Thank you. And I'd like to invite forward now Pastor Emily Hamilton of the First Lutheran Church in Malden.
My name is Emily Hamilton, and I'm the pastor at First Lutheran Church in Malden, just about a mile and a half over that way. And I know you've heard from two pastors already, so I'm going to be brief. But in the Christian tradition, as Pastor Dan mentioned, we believe that every human being is made in the imago Dei, the image of God. And usually we talk about this in a really theological way. We talk about our spirits or our talents being things that reflect who God is, but today I think it's important to take a more holistic and literal approach. If every person is made in God's image, then despite all of the Renaissance art that we've grown up seeing in our textbooks, God's image is not just white. God is Asian. God is Asian American, Pacific Islander. God is a woman. God's holiness is reflected in every person of Asian descent, and we mourn the violence against this community as deeply as we mourn the death of Jesus on the cross. We condemn these hateful acts against the Asian community in our nation, and particularly the ongoing bias and violence in our own Malden community. So in solidarity, we promise to dig deep into our tradition and our hearts and our faith to become better partners in our shared work for a just and transformed society. And because we're a praying people, I would like to close my portion with a short prayer. God of love and liberation, God our Mother, send comfort and strength to all those who mourn, and courage to all that we might act. Grant, O God, that your holy and life-giving Spirit may move every human heart, that the barrier of racism that divides us may crumble, that anti-Asian violence would disappear and xenophobia cease. Heal our hearts so that we might live in justice and peace. Through your child, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. When you arrived this evening, hopefully you were given a candle, and there may still be some floating around if you didn't get one yet. And if you have not already done so, please light it now. These candles are a light in the shadows of the evening, just as each person here is a light pushing back the shadows of racism and xenophobia. So take a moment to look around and see the lights that are all around you. You are the light of justice shining in our community, the light the shadows will not overcome. And I invite you to take your candle and place it on the steps, remembering to maintain your social distance, and if possible, placing them at the top first so that the people behind you will not step on candles on their way down. As you do so, set an intention or say a prayer for those we've lost, so that the candle becomes a symbol of your commitment to shine with justice in the days ahead.
Can I what? Can I do what?
Doesn't end here. There are several ways you can get involved with local communities. You can join or volunteer at an organization whose mission you believe in. Organizations who serve low-income BIPOC communities like GMAACC, Malden Neighbors Helping Neighbors, MaldenCORE, MPAA, and many others. You can support anti-racist policies and legislations that aim to allocate funding for more mental health support, affordable housing, transit access, and language access. You can reach out to your local and state elected officials and ask for their support on these policies. Policies that center well-being rather than surveillance and punitive measures. And lastly, you can also support GMAACC's capital campaign to raise money for the first Asian American Community Center in Malden. This will be a space for us to offer services to our community and host programs for youth and seniors. Thank you all again so much for coming today. 多謝大家. And next, I'm going to invite GMAACC board member and co-founder Sifu Maidu.
Good evening, everybody. What a moving event, and it's not possible without everybody's heart and commitment to community. We heard a lot about grief, about activism, but I here represent Wallam Confluent Tai Chi Academy and our drumming team. First, I would like to highlight that Tomiko read the poetry, and there was a line that said, "The drummer drummed." And the drummer did drum earlier. The drummer will go on, and we will end with drumming. In traditional lion dance, martial art, and plenty of people here have seen our lion dance in Malden, Greater Boston, all over New England. And you've heard our drumming for celebratory events such as New Year, birthdays, weddings, community festivals. You have also heard our drumming for civic engagement, such as standouts for Senator Jason Lewis, some of our elected officials here as well. But tonight, our drumming will have a different purpose. We heard about silence. And oftentimes, Asian Americans are thought to be very quiet. We are silent. And yet we are also being silenced. We bring the drum out today to close this day by claiming that the silence that we have been honoring is to respect and mourn and to grieve. But we will break that silence. We break it with the drum. And tonight, the drum sound that you will hear, all of us will participate in, will be the drum for social justice. We will be silenced no more. No more. 75-year-old Xiaojun Xie, an elder in San Francisco, she said no more. We fight back in order to be safe. We will not be silenced no more. The sound of social justice is heard here in Malden, Massachusetts, and will continue to be heard. And I invite you to be no longer the bystander, but the upstander, in the words of Senator Lewis. We will do something, and we will all be united doing it together. And with that, I would like to invite everybody to join in with the drumming. If you were here earlier, you saw our short drum set where we all scream "ha" very loudly at the end. as the drums sound later, and as the drummer and the players of the gong and the cymbals scream ha, we all scream ha in unity. Are we ready for that? All right, can I invite the Wallam warriors? Before we start, I would like to ask permission to break this silence and bring on light and love with our drum sound. You guys ready to scream?